What's going on, Tamers? It is me, official Net Battler East, and I say that because recently Capcom dropped the Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection game for the Switch, Steam, PS4, I think, pretty much everything. This is probably one of my favorite game series of all time, and I've been playing it non-stop since it came out on Friday. Side note, if you're a card game player and you've never played this game, definitely go back and give it a shot. It is so fun. They've added a bunch of new stuff to it to make the online playable, so there's actually a PvP mode now that doesn't require a link cable. I just dated myself, I know. Also, the single player story mode is fantastic, and they're basically 6 games that are like 30 hours a piece, and so for 60 bucks, that's a pretty dang good deal. But anyway, back to Digimon stuff. So we've wrapped up the 7th week of the BT13 VS Royal Knights set over here in Japan and Asia, and it feels like after looking at the results that the dust is starting to settle. We're only about halfway through this set's lifespan, but it feels like we've already gotten the decks set, we've also got the deck list set, so now it just comes down to a matter of being able to run your game plan against your opponent. With that being said, let's take a look at a couple decks that were actually able to run their game plan, some of the event results from the past week, as well as a couple of key takeaways. So looking at last week's results, like I said before, it feels like we have a really clear picture of what the meta looks like right now over here in Asia and Japan. Things like MachineDRAYmon at the top, Royal Knights, as well as Belphemon doing well. Blue Flare has been a fantastic deck if you want to run a lot of counter strategies against some of the top decks. You probably noticed that there's quite a bit of Bloom Quartz topping over here. You see it in the champion level here for results. I will say take this with a grain of salt. Some of the events that this topped at were actually quite small, so for what that's worth, just keep that in mind. And then below those well-established decks, we see a lot of the familiar faces as well. Things like MachineDRAYmon and Gacha Gaming, Red Hybrid is up there as well. I've been playing with Red Hybrid a lot recently. In fact, I did a deck profile on it, so if you're interested in that deck and the cards that are coming out in BT12 over in the West, definitely take a look at that deck profile. But I also saw some really interesting and creative lists that topped as well. These Galamon lists that I saw were actually pretty cool, and I would definitely want to take a look at those a little bit later. And then, of course, things like Grandis, Alpha, Kentaro Swan is kind of sticking around there. This deck is actually performing much better than I thought it would. And then finally, another Sugimon list tops here. This might be a little bit misleading. I feel like the deck that topped is maybe more Edamon focused, but we'll take a look at it in a moment anyway. Looking at deck list, the first one I want to take a look at is going to be this MachineDRAYmon Chaosdramon deck that topped last week. I'm specifically looking at this one because the event size was actually really good, and I want to put out quality information for like events that actually had a lot of players. And so this is one of those. I was really surprised because this deck is super heavy on the top end. You'll notice it runs 15 level 5s. I think most of those I've seen have run maybe like 12 or 13, but 15 is pretty chunky out there. And I was kind of surprised because this deck already runs quite a few level 6s. Like this one runs 11 level 6s already, so 11 level 6s plus 15 level 5s is more than half the deck could be like a potentially really bad starting hand. The level 5 spread does look really good though. So you typically want to run a couple more copies of the dual color level 5 cards, things like the MachineDRAYmon, MegaDramon. You could potentially cut this to 1, but I guess it's a toss-up, just a deck building decision. And then of course MachineDRAYmon as well. Gotta have at least 2 copies of this guy in the deck. And then the rest of the level 5s to get a slew of other effects, things like Reboot for the MachineDRAYmon, the MachineDRAYmon to be able to blast, cost 5 cards and lower. This effect is actually really good recently. Blocker from your Andramon as well as your MachineDRAYmon here. So the MachineDRAYmon here is an interesting choice. I think most folks end up going with like the black copy. I think it's like BT1 or maybe even a starter deck copy of MegaDramon, but that card doesn't have blocker, so I guess technically in this case MachineDRAYmon is actually a better choice because it has blocker and inheritance as well as blocker for the actual card. And because this deck actually tends to digivolve quite a bit, having a level 5 blocker could be more useful than just having a card that gets blocker and inheritance. And then once we get to the level 4s here, the space actually gets really tight. 3 copies of the Guardramon. This guy's been a staple for the deck for quite a while now, having that card draw ability and inheritance. But I love the inclusion of the new Hover Espimon. I wish more people use this card. I honestly prefer it over Guardramon, but I think that I'm in the minority there. But the ability to look at your opponent's security and then either get card draw or gain memory off of it is really good. And then what's even better is you can stack that security card either back at the top or at the bottom of the security stack. So yeah, really cool card here. It gives you the ability to set up the way you want to take out your opponent's security, and if something like Chaos the Great is next, then you put that bad boy way at the bottom, or if you have a bunch of Digimon on board, you put it on top, right? And then of course Numemon is always a fantastic choice. He doesn't have the cyborg or machine trait, but a 3-cost play and a 1-cost Digivolve is really hard to pass up. The last thing I want to note about this deck is actually the comment that the person who won made, and that they said that they're really excited for the starter decks as well as the new Mulligan rule. For folks out there in the West playing this game, you know that the Mulligan already is in effect from April 1st, but over here in Asia and Japan, we're not going to get that until May 1st. So we're still waiting on it, and I assume that this deck is going to only get better once that Mulligan is out. The next list we're going to take a look at is going to be Galamon, and this is one of those lists that I took a look at and I'm like, man, what a sick idea. This is so cool. I think that folks have noticed that there have been a mix of red and purple Gallantmon cards that have come out, but there hasn't been someone to actually put those cards together in like a really good deck. And with the inclusion of the new Gallantmon that came out in BT13, the one that's actually used in the Royal Knights deck, actually he's really good in red-purple Gallantmon decks as well, and you'll see here in just a moment why. So you see some of the normal Gidomon cards that are from past sets that we've seen before, but what's really cool here is the new Gidomon from EX4, who has Rush if you have 20 cards in the trash when he's played. So this is a way for you to close out games pretty quickly, or to just get a Gidomon down and be able to attack with it immediately. And then as we progress past the level 3 stage, the level 4s and 5s are all focused on either playing Tamers for free or getting cards in the trash, not only for your trash, but also your opponent's. So a lot of these cards will mill something like 2 cards out of both players' trash, or 3 cards out of both players' trash. You've got the EX3 Growlmon here, who gives you security attack +1 if you destroy one of your other Digimon. So between little power-ups like that, as well as the ability for this deck to just mill cards in both players' trash at the same time, it gets your Dukemons or your Gallantmons here online much quicker. So a lot of folks know that this Gallantmon used in Royal Knights is really strong because he not only destroys a Digimon on play, but also on Digivolve and on attack, and it's not locked to once per turn. So you can destroy a lot of stuff when he hits the board. But what's even better about him, especially in this deck, is that his cost gets reduced by 2 for every 5 cards in both players' trash. So for example, if there are 5 cards in your trash and 5 cards in your opponent's trash, his cost gets reduced by 4. So the idea is to mill as many cards as you possibly can out of both players' trash. You deny them resources in the meantime. Then once you build those trash piles up, you can play this Gallantmon for really, really cheap. And he also has Rush. So the idea is that you have a couple copies of these in hand that you collect over the course of the game. And then end of the game, or your final turn when you're going to win, you drop like 2 or 3 of these bad boys and just like eat up your opponent's security. And then we've got a couple copies of the BT12 Gallantmon as well as Gallantmon X Antibody, because these are just fantastic cards on their own. Again, I love this deck list. It's such a really cool idea, and it uses the new Gallantmon card from BT13 in a way that we've never seen before. So I think over the course of the next week, this might be my pet project. And the last deck we're going to look at today is going to be the Sukamon deck that topped last week. So I think if you look at this deck at face value, you can get a little misled, because you do see a lot of these Sukamon cards for this deck. Things like the Platinum Scumon that just came out, regular Scumon, the old Scumon who plays a Chumon when he's destroyed, as well as the Sukamon King mode as well from both the BT11 set, but also the BT13 set. But what's really cool is this deck is also very Edamon heavy, and that's on purpose. So you see the regular Edamon from BT3. This guy is like from way, way back in the day. And then you've got the Metal Edamons as well as 4 copies of the King Edamon. So you're probably wondering, why are so many of these cards? The player comment for when they won is actually a really good indicator of what this deck does, and that you get to this Edamon here level 5, and suddenly it becomes a gacha game. So when he's destroyed, he gets to look at the top X cards of the deck, and then you can play an Edamon from there for free. And because you've got not only 4 regular Edamon, but also 4 King Edamon and 4 Metal Edamon at the same time, chances are pretty likely you're going to grab one of these guys. It provides you a way to get your level 6s super quickly. You'll notice that this deck does cut things like the Pride Memory Boost, because it does run so many top-end cards here, and they're replaced with the regular Black Memory Boost. But what I really like here is the inclusion of the Kojiro cards, or the Izzy Tamers, because he lets you kind of stack the deck and see what's coming up, so you can actually plan to use this Edamon card if you want to. So yeah, if you're like me and you love Edamon, and you also like Sukamon, because Sukamon King Mode is such a funny card, I definitely give this deck a try. Anyways, folks, that's going to wrap up this week's meta report for Japan and Asia for the BT13 versus Royal Knight set. I'm really looking forward to the new set of promo cards that are releasing next week. I think they're going to shake up the game quite a bit. It'll be really interesting to see how that turns out. We'll probably have the results for that in about 2 weeks or so, I'd say. Again, they're releasing on, I think, Friday, so after that, we'll finally have a chance to get them into the wild and actually add events. Also, if you have any questions about anything that we talked about today, or things that we didn't talk about today, feel free to put those in the comments below. Do my best to answer those as soon as I possibly can. Anyway, folks, I'm going to get out of here. Before you get out of here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.